What was the dumbest way someone has died that you've heard about? I read about a guy who died after falling from a balcony at a drunken party. The next night, another guy fell to his death from the same balcony while demonstrating for friends how the guy had fallen the previous night. Like, he was walking along the railing, like this. There was a guy who came to our high school to give this speech about drinking and driving. He said, now that graduation was upon our senior class, that we should be cautious, and if our peers happen to be under the influence, we should watch out for them, drive them home, call adults and whatnot. Barely 2 weeks after that, dude passed away due to drinking and driving. 2 Darwin Awards I remember. 1. A tour bus driver stops at a rest stop, but forgets to put the parking brake on. After getting out of the bus, they see it rolling forward, and try to stop it by standing in front of it and pushing. 2. A guy thought it would be fun to drop large pieces of concrete from an overpass on cars driving below. He found the biggest one he could move with rebar sticking out of it and dragged it to the overpass. As he was pushing it over the edge, some rebar caught his pants, pulling him over the edge as well. This one guy from my village, it's his birthday and they're at a restaurant, suddenly started choking on his food. All his friends began to panic just for him to start laughing. He thought it was funny. He died the next course choking on a piece of meat. He died in the presence of his friends and family, who were ignoring him, thinking it was another prank. My friend's cousin, him and his friend were bored one day, so they decided to have a gunfight. He got shot in the head. They were 16. When I was in high school, my agriculture teacher was driving the bus to take me and the rest of my FFA chapter to a convention. On the way, he ended up making an unexpected detour to a graveyard. He parked the bus, got off, and went to have a moment of silence by one of the tombstones. Everyone on the bus was confused, but we gave him his time because we could see that it was important. We asked him who he was visiting. When he got back on the bus, he said it was one of his childhood friends. When he was a kid, he and his friends were roasting marshmallows by a fire. They were effing around like kids do, and one of his friends accidentally ended up putting one of the hot roasting sticks through another friend's eye. I don't know the specific medical complications that took place, but he ended up dying. It was a total freak accident. I'm 27 now, but that story always stuck with me. I thought it was really sweet and thoughtful that he made a point of intermittently visiting his childhood friend. But also, what a dumb way to lose your life, especially at such a young age. I'm a plumber, and someone who worked for my company died about 7 years ago on the job. Co-worker went on a service call and ended up having to grind out some old cast iron pipe and replace with PVC. The homeowner neglected to mention he makes fireworks in his spare time and had a faint barrel of gunpowder in the same room as the pipe. Sparks were flying and some landed on the gunpowder, blowing up my co-worker and the homeowner, both dead on sight. There was a guy in my province who died by sofa sledding. By sofa sledding, I mean they tie a sofa behind a car truck and drag it around with someone on the sofa. I know people can get bored in the more remote region of my province, but video game consoles exist. Got a classmate died when he turned 22. He was on a balcony with some mates, drinking. Thought he could do a backflip and hang onto the rails like in an action movie. He missed and fell 6 floors, head first. I'm a recovering alcoholic. We're talking no solid food, handle of 95+ proof from every day, plus whatever shit beer the corner store had in stock. When I ran out before passing out, lather, rinse, repeat 4 years at a time, before finally sobering up a bit over 5 years ago. Credentials firmly established. Good, I've never been that drunk. Toronto lawyer Gary Hoy was giving a tour and decided to demonstrate his favorite party trick, throwing himself against the windows of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower so the students could see just how resilient the glass was. Hoy had performed the stunt to audiences countless times before, as well as demonstrating the strength of the windows. It was clear that he enjoyed showing off a bit. The first time Hoy body slammed the window that day, he bounced off as he had every other time. But then he threw himself at the window a second time. Instead of bouncing off the window as he had the first time, he went straight through, plunging 24 stories down toward the building courtyard below. The fall killed him instantly. The glass didn't shatter immediately, but rather popped out of its frame. Also, that one guy who said, "F that alligator," jumped into the water and was immediately killed. That's my favorite one. He was in Orange, Texas, at a bar marina. He was drunk, and the man who managed the place told them to stay out of the water because there was an 8+ foot gator lingering in the area. Apparently they looked around and didn't see it, so the one guy yelled, "F that alligator," and cannonballed off the pier. The gator was enjoying the shade beneath it. It grabbed the guy almost instantly and took him under. They found most of him, about 6-8 hours later, in the reeds on the opposite bank. Edit. Oh, apparently the girl he was with did see it, but he ignored her. I briefly tried to make "F that alligator" the new "hold my beer," but it only caught on with some friends. It should be on the guy's tombstone, though. A few weeks ago a guy in my town was drunk, was told not to F with the alligator that was near the bar. It's Florida, ya know, and ended up losing half of his arm to it. There's video of it and everything of him rolling around in the reeds near the water with most of his arm missing. Then also video of bystanders keeping him alive for EMTs. His family set up a GoFundMe to help pay his medical bills. But F that. All that money should go to a cause far less stupid than drunk Florida man had his arm bitten off by local dinosaur. On top of it all, people want to have the alligator killed when it was just doing normal alligator things. There was a show called 1000 Ways to Die. I remember one story about a guy that rubber banded a sausage to his penis and wore tight jeans to give the illusions that he had a huge cock. The rubber bands caused a blood clot that went to his brain and killed him. Witnessed firsthand. Forklift slipped off a ramp and crushed someone. The driver was okay, not mentally, but he walked away with minor bruises. The poor crushed idiot ran towards the falling forklift, as if he could stop it from falling. My stubborn, bedridden, horribly obese grandfather paid a homeless man $20 to roll him out of the hospital and into the back of his truck, using a furniture dolly to take him home. He didn't want to be in the hospital, and nobody would take him home because he was being treated for numerous conditions including diabetic stroke and liver failure. He was found dead in his lazy boy the next afternoon, sitting in his own shit, covered in spilled potatoes, corn, and gravy, with the Golf Channel still playing on his cable TV. We only know the story because the homeless man got arrested for trespassing in the private areas of the hospital. Edit. I'll answer some questions since I'm getting a lot of repeats. He was given very high odds of survival. I want to say 90%, but it's been a long time and don't remember exactly. This is why he wanted to go home. He wouldn't listen when told those were his odds of survival while at the hospital. He didn't go home with the intent to die in his house. He was not trying to save the family on medical expenses. He went home because he was a stubborn old cuss who thought he knew better. The homeless man was an ex-co-worker of my weird uncle, who has been an hourly painter for the past 40 years. He lived in his truck. He is not in prison, but we don't know what he's up to. According to my dad, my grandpa was trying to call people outside the family who would do him a favor for a few bucks. He settled on an immigrant painter who was always down on cash. My last memory of him is my grandma asking what he wanted for dinner and him saying, "A gun," because he was in so much pain. This was right before he finally agreed to go to the hospital. My late uncle died in a motorcycle accident years ago. He decided to get drunk with a friend at 3 AM and then ride down the train tracks going 50 miles per hour alone. Apparently he wiped out somewhere on the tracks and passed out drunk. I'm told he likely didn't feel anything when he got run over, as his head was severed from his body. Edit. For the sake of your loved ones, please don't drink and drive. I remember reading an article about a Japanese man who constantly got tickets for not wearing his seatbelt, so he made a fake seatbelt that he wore while driving to avoid the tickets. He died in a car accident that would have been a minor accident if he was wearing his real seatbelt. This was somebody I personally knew as a kid, but this was in adulthood, after we lost touch. I have mixed feeling about it because you feel terrible about the loss of a childhood friend, but you also have to shake your head and say, what a dumbus. Hurricane Ike hit Texas in 2008. Most people evacuated my town, and with good reason. Most of the town ended up being entirely destroyed. Some people stayed behind because they figured it wasn't a big deal, or because they figured they'd defend their property from looters. My friend thought it might be a nice day to go out fishing. The storm hit. He got knocked out of his boat somehow and never came back up. While it's sad, it's also dumb. My cousin got high after a long time of not getting high and wound up pulling a heavy dresser on top of herself, and she died. Of all the ways to die, a effing dresser. She would be livid with herself if she were still here, and I know she'd call herself a dumb cunt or something along those lines. I miss her terribly, but still can't believe how she went out. The kid who ate a slug on a dare got infected with the rat lungworm parasite which infected his brain, went into a coma, woke up a year later completely paralyzed, then died. Woke up a year later completely paralyzed, then died. Nope. He woke up and lived for around 10 years paralyzed, then died. Recently read an article about that. He was 100% mentally there, too, according to his friends and family, but even speaking was almost impossible for him. Guy known to police in my city, who was the subject of many news articles, was apparently at a campground with two girls, not sure who they were to him, and they got into an argument and he beat the shit out of them. Police were called, and I guess he figured his best option was to make it look like self-defense, so he stabbed himself in the side with a knife and proceeded to die from the wound. Reality really can be stranger than fiction. Great-granddad died early on the morning on the 9th of May 1945 by falling over the walls of his barracks in France after sneaking past the MPs, blind drunk, because he was celebrating VE Day the night before. Egypt survived the entire war and broke his neck before getting sent home. Edit. I think he was a chef or something, and our grandmother remembers her mum, his wife, not grieving, but just being absolutely raging at him for the rest of her life because he left her with about 7 kids. I don't think she ever even visited his grave in France. Not sure it classifies as dumbest way to die, because I can understand why they didn't think about it, but basically a couple of people drowned at a party because they put dry ice in a swimming pool to get some fog. The dry ice is nothing but CO2, so it will evaporate, and since it is heavier than air, it will replace the air above the water in the pool, so people simply passed out from breathing CO2 and then drowned. Pretty sad way to go. Edit. As a few people have pointed out, it might have been liquid nitrogen and not CO2/dry ice. I'm not sure, as I wasn't there. Asian dude crawled into a septic tank underneath a woman's house so he could watch her pee. Couldn't turn his body back around and got stuck and died. Woman notices an extra foul smell a week later and they find his corpse. Edit. Adding Google search. Mysterious death in female toilet, Fukushima, Japan. I still remember this, almost 30 years later, on the 6th of September 1995, outside of Talladega, Alabama, 2 drunk rednecks thought it would be fun to toss a rattlesnake back and forth between them by its tail. Not liking the game, the snake let both of them have it. 35-year-old Joe Buddy Kane lost his life in this pursuit, while his companion, Junior Bright, had to be hospitalized. Junior Bright, the most perfect name possible for this kind of story. I'm always amazed by folks who die in car accidents because their GPS told them to drive where they shouldn't, like off a closed bridge or even a cliff, and they just follow directions and never questioned it. There's a dude that would pretend to be a police officer and call fast food establishments and tell the manager that one of their female workers was stealing from them. The guy on the phone would tell the manager that he needed to restrain the woman in some way and search her, usually a strip search. It's crazy what people will do when told to do so. A young guy in my hometown got hit by a train when he tried to cross the rails on his dirt bike. What's special about it? The track was almost not used. There were like 5 connections per day going there. On top of that, A train station was really close to that unfortunate place, and trains were still running relatively slow. A teen girl took an entire 24-pack of Panadol to get her boyfriend's attention. After he dumped her, parents found out, and the next day she was at the hospital feeling fine but miserable that it didn't get the reaction she wanted. Doctors told her to say goodbye to everyone because she would be dead in 2 weeks from catastrophic organ failure. Nothing anyone could do for her. Similar situation with a kid I knew, mid-late teens, made an attempt to end his life by drinking some kind of cleaning fluid, maybe Drano, I can't remember. Immediately changed his mind and called for help. Died a couple of days later. His injuries were too severe. Top of the list is a teacher who attached wires from an electric blanket to himself to supposedly test pain tolerance. No idea if that's the real story, but he had apparently told people about it. He electrocuted himself. Second is the son of a friend's sister. He and his brother imagined themselves to be big-time gangsters. They stole a lawnmower from a neighbor who saw them and then drove to their home and took it back. They hopped in their car and drove back to his house to confront him for disrespecting them. He ran the brothers off by brandishing a firearm. They went home and got a baseball bat to show him who the real tough guys are. They went back, threatened the man, and he shot one of them in the leg. They ran to their car, gathered some courage, then went to confront the man again. This time, one brother got a bullet to the eye and the other got one in the shoulder. One died, and the other has a limp and can't throw a ball anymore. I used to have a book called Man Suffocated by Potatoes. It was a collection of all sorts of barroom conversation stuff, like how much a ladder costs in the USAF, etc. One section is on people dying, including a guy crushed by potatoes in a warehouse. He cut out a supporting strut, and a woman crushed by a truckload of Seville oranges. In Seville, I investigated a guy who jumped a railing on the side of the road. The road ran along the top of a quarry. Another timed his fake gassing himself in the garage so his wife would find him, but she was late home. This is kind of an indirect death. A close friend and her husband were out walking their dog in the neighborhood, like they'd done 1,000 times. The dog jerked his leash, and the husband lost his footing and fell against a tree. My friend kept saying, "Come on, quit clowning around and get up." Well, he had broken his neck and was completely paralyzed. He spent about a week in the hospital, going through test after test. He was fully conscious and aware, but could only communicate through blinking, and could not even breathe on his own. When all his tests came back that he would never recover use of the rest of his body, he chose to have the plug pulled on himself. My favorite is the inventor of the parachute was so confident in his calculations that he didn't test it with a dummy, but tested it himself, promptly descended too rapidly and died on impact. Turns out, he hadn't factored the weight of the parachute material into his calculations. A man had his car break down on the highway one night. He tried to use his cell phone to call for help, but the noise from the highway was so loud, he couldn't hear, so he wandered off of the highway 100 yards or so in order to make his phone call. Unfortunately, he wandered onto some train tracks. The train conductor noticed a man standing on the train tracks with a cell phone up to one ear and his hand covering his other ear to block the noise from the oncoming train. Modern day methods tend to involve TikTok trends. One of them, trending ATM, is jumping off a moving boat, one going at high speeds. So far it has claimed 4 lives, the most common symptom being a broken neck. My guess is, at that speed, falling into water isn't that much different from falling onto cement. If they go head first, well, you get a broken neck. My friend's boyfriend at the time and his 2 other friends were coming back from somewhere. They were what we call tripling on a motorcycle, which means 3 people riding one motorcycle. So, they were on a highway and one of them wasn't wearing a helmet. The guy who was driving, boyfriend, got distracted by something I don't remember, but he lost control and the bike slipped. The driver was dragged by the motorcycle to the side of the highway, broke his knee and got several other bruises. Another one fell, but managed to save himself at the last second and got off the road. The one who wasn't wearing the helmet fell, cracked his head on the road, was run over by a passing truck and died on the spot. My dad was hired to fix up a rental home once, and the guy he was working with got killed trying to fix the stove. He didn't cut the breaker off, and it shorted as he was taking it apart. He probably would have walked away with just a nasty shock had he not been wearing a giant cowboy style belt buckle that was pressed against the stove when it shorted. Or he could have been not shocked at all if he'd just cut the breaker off. Was on a jury once that had to give some rubber stamps on a few police findings and whatnot. Woman, mother in her mid 40s, had gone to the bathroom. They had one of those collapsing drying racks opposite the toilet, the kind with thin wooden slats that crisscrossed each other when the thing was extended. Well, she passed out and fell forward. Her throat landed on the rack in just the right arrangement that it blocked her airway and she choked. Her toddlers were right outside. She locked them out for a moment of privacy. Aeschylus, an ancient Greek playwright, was killed at the age of 67 when an eagle dropped a tortoise on his head. The eagle is said to have mistaken his baldness for a rock and tried to use it to crack the shell of its prey. To add a further strange twist to the death of Aeschylus, Roman author Pliny suggested that Aeschylus had been spending a lot of time outdoors to avoid a prophecy that he would be killed by a falling object. My grandfather died in a drawbridge accident. He was over 80 at the time and walked the same route every morning that included a drawbridge. That morning, the operator didn't see him and didn't sound the alarm that is usually sounded when the bridge goes up. The bridge gate lifted when he was in the very center. He fell on the grates, and when it got to the top, he held on for as long he could before falling to the pavement and dying. It was horrendous, and my family sued the city for killing him. He was an awesome guy. My mom's neighbor when she was little was sticking her tongue out, catching the fresh drops of an icicle hanging on her garage. Her little brother came around the corner with a shovel and knocked the icicles down, and the one icicle went through her eye and into her entire head and killed her instantly. Local cop was COVID denier, got COVID, took horse paste to cure something he didn't think was real. It obviously didn't work and he took a turn for the worse. Took more horse paste, died from overdose of horse paste.